In recent years, discussions about the role of biodiversity in business activities has been coming to the forefront, and businesses are starting to consider the opportunities and risks associated with nature in general or biodiversity. For young students and young professionals, they are often being bombarded with new terminologies and concepts about nature. You hear of TFD, then nature, then biodiversity, then nature positive, etc. And this is leaving them with an overwhelming sense of helplessness, because it is one thing to contend with the issues surrounding your profession, but it's a totally different ball game when you have to deal with issues from another field that you have little understanding about. And this happens for any field. For example, if you are in financing infrastructure, you need some bit of knowledge about civil engineering, as well as some knowledge on nature and the feasibility studies that are associated. And of course, this is in addition to your basic field of financing infrastructure. And so today I want to take the initiative of discussing ecosystem services and their relationship to business activities. And so the first question is, what are ecosystem services? And generally, ecosystem services are the contributions of nature or biodiversity or ecosystems to our quality of life and well-being. And generally, ecosystem services are divided into 4 categories. And the first one are the provisioning ones. So provisioning is basically the tangible goods that we get from nature. Think of fruits, think of water, think of different types of foods, think of construction materials. So that's an ecosystem service that we receive. And the second one is the regulating aspect of it. So nature or ecosystems regulate drainage, they regulate flooding, they regulate climate. And so it's a very important service that they give to us. And the third one is about the cultural. And this is basically the intangible aspects, such as the educational and recreational issues associated with the contribution of ecosystems to our life. So when you are in an environment that is relaxing, that helps you with your mental well-being, so that's a culture, that's under the category of the cultural benefits for ecosystem services. And finally, the supporting aspect of it is the fact that ecosystem services help to sustain other ecosystem services. For example, in terms of the circulation of nutrients and also providing habitat for plants and animals. So one ecosystem service is offering a service to another ecosystem service, which is ultimately of benefit to us. And so, having discussed ecosystem services, I think one clarification that is necessary is on the difference between nature and biodiversity. Because, for example, with the TNFD, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, they use the word nature, yet in the deeper discussions you find the discussion being about biodiversity, because nature is just in general things that do not need the direct intervention of people. For example, the existence and continuation of forests or rivers, they continue without our direct interventions. So it's that simple. Things that occur without our direct interventions. But when it comes to biodiversity, yes, it's about nature, and it's also, it doesn't have a lot of necessarily interventions by humans. But we are talking about the balance of plants and animals and microorganisms and the ecosystems, such that they can be able to function optimally. So, for example, when you have planted 1,000 trees of the same type, say eucalyptus, that's, you are contributing to nature, especially with carbon sequestration. But at the same time, you have to understand that there are animals that depend on forest, the understory of forest, and when you don't consider that then the system is not balanced well to provide most of the ecosystem services that it's supposed to provide. So biodiversity or biological diversity looks at the different aspects, different plants, different animals, different ecosystems and niches that contribute to the optimal ecosystem services. Now, the task force on nature related financial disclosures is very close to TCFD, but in this case, it's a bit challenging, but it's because nature is a bit sophisticated in how you measure, but that's something we'll be coming back to. But basically, the TNFD is a platform that allows organizations, financial institutions, businesses to assess their risks and the opportunities in nature with relation to their business, and also gives them the platform to declare or report their linkage with nature and on their impact on nature and issues like environmental degradation that is caused by their business activities. But it is not easy to understand such an issue in terms of, for example, how to compensate for degradation of nature if you don't really understand the economics of biodiversity. So one of the most interesting reports or texts in recent years on this topic is what is called the Dasgupta review, which was released in 2021, and it looks at the relationship between biodiversity and economics. And at the core of it are two important things: is that Dasgupta looks at nature as an asset. And so the point here is we shouldn't be looking at nature or biodiversity or ecosystems as just something that we should be concerned about, but we should look at nature as capital. We should be looking at nature as an asset and considering, just the same way we look at other assets like buildings, we need also to consider nature as an asset. And the second thing is putting value on nature. And his argument is we need to reconsider our economic models and approaches, because ideally when we are talking about the wealth of a nation, we are talking about the productivity of a nation and the quality of life of the people. And we are looking at what the country is producing and in terms of goods and services, as well as the effectiveness of producing that. But GDP in general is really measuring what is coming out, the products that are coming out, even though they are coming from nature. It's not looking at the degradation or the depreciation of nature as a resource. And one example that Dasgupta gives that really shows how we are treating nature differently and unfortunately is the fact that there is no company that really boasts of making big sales or huge revenues, while at the same time it is destroying factories and buildings that they own. That would be like, you would be laughed at if you are claiming to be making big sales and big profits at the expense of destroying your factories and buildings. And this is exactly what we are doing with nature. But nature or biodiversity as a challenge when it comes to measuring it. Not to mean that it cannot be measured, but Dasgupta introduces this concept of the invisibility of nature. And this is not to say that we cannot see nature, but the specific impact and who to assign the responsibility for what is the destruction that is happening in nature is not a simple issue, because the value chain is long, and there is also at the same time the problem of double counting, where you might end up taxing people at the top, while at the same time we are taxing people at the bottom, at the raw material level. So one of the challenge that Dasgupta gives is we have to think about how to unweave the whole chain of supply and value addition, so that we can be able to understand things from all the way from the raw material point to the point where people are sharing profits. Because without that, we are going to have a situation where people will be cutting away big profits, while at the same time we are overburdening the people who are at the bottom. Of course, it's not a small game to play, because first of all, how do you determine the community that is taking care of resources and that needs to be compensated for their contribution to nature and the effect of the degradation that's caused by businesses? Because remember, the way nature works, unlike buildings, is that nature is not limited to boundaries, like what you see on maps. You can say it's a county, it's a prefecture, it's a district. So there is that challenge of really determining the communities involved and how to compensate them for the damages, because there is some kind of limitlessness of the extent of nature or the impact that you have on nature. But there is a little hope, and one example that Dasgupta gives is that when we are paying taxes to government, we don't ask how many thieves that the police have caught. We don't ask how many thousands of copies of documents that the government has produced, but we understand that the government is providing a crucial service that is helping to create a good environment for business. And so in the same way, even though we cannot measure production from land or the ecosystem services in the same way we measure the production of cars from factories, there is still hope that just the same way we deal with governments without us having to ask for each number in terms of the service they're offering, that we can finally understand that nature is an asset and it can be given value which can be considered in accounting, and also the communities can be compensated because of the degradation that is happening in nature.